Starting this video off strong with some mysterious holes in my bag of fiber. It appears someone decided to give this a taste. The perpetrator is pretty cute though, so I'll forgive him, but he's definitely not sorry, and he will do it again. Anyways, today I'm gonna try my hand at spinning rolags for the first time. These gorgeous ones are from Hidden Pastures Luxury Fiber Farm. In case you're not familiar with rolags, they are a fiber that has been prepped by carding either on hand carders, a blending board, or a drum carder and rolled into cylinders. I'm gonna make a 2-ply yarn, so I only need half the fiber for the first bobbin. Let's get started. And by getting started, I mean oil my wheel. It's good practice to do this every time you spin, but I am guilty of skipping it sometimes. Now I'm ready to get started with the actual spinning. Every yarn starts by threading the orifice. I really wished there was a different name for this part of the spinning wheel, but that's what it's called. For the singles, I'm spinning my wheel clockwise and letting that twist build up in the leader yarn before attaching my fiber. I'm adjusting the tension here to get the bobbin to pull the yarn onto it, but I usually have to wind the first little bit on by hand because my leader is a bit slippery. Then to attach my fiber, I'm drafting a little bit off the end of the rolag and threading it through the end of the leader and folding the fiber back onto itself, then letting the twist travel up into the drafted fiber to secure the end. Now I gotta figure out how I'm gonna draft or pull apart the fiber. I decided to pre-draft the rolag by pulling it apart before spinning to help me get a more consistent single, and pre-drafting can make drafting while the wheel spins a lot easier, especially when your wheel cooperates. But my wheel was giving me all kinds of trouble while I was spinning this yarn. Like here, it didn't want to keep spinning as I treadled, so I had to keep restarting it with my hand. I used a stop and draft method when I spun the Midnight Purple yarn in my last video, but that was on purpose because I couldn't draft that fiber fast enough to spin the wheel and draft at the same time. However, this fiber is drafting really nicely, so I would have been able to keep up with the speed of the wheel, and this should have been a nice, easy, smooth spin, but my wheel was off balance or something because it was acting up. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really having to use a lot of force to treadle and keep this wheel going. Just before starting this yarn, when I was moving my wheel to my seat, one of the legs fell off and I pushed it back in its hole, but that's the only reason I can think of for why my wheel is misbehaving. Anyways, when spinning singles, you'll need to know how to join fiber, whether that's because you're adding a new section of fiber or your fiber attached to the wheel breaks off. All you gotta do is fluff up the end of your single and fluff up the end of your fiber, mash them together, stretch them out a little bit, and then let the twist travel up. And that's basically it, and then you just keep spinning like usual. You might need to give it a tug and make sure it's got enough twist. If it pulls apart, it did not have enough twist. Now let's talk a little bit more about drafting. I'm not really a purist when it comes to drafting yarn. I kind of just do whatever feels right for the fiber. But there are two main categories for drafting, which are woolen and worsted. And the difference between the two is where the twist is allowed to travel. So with woolen spinning, the twist is allowed into the drafting zone, and worsted spinning does not allow the twist into the drafting zone. The drafting method does affect the final outcome of the yarn, but I'll get into all that another time with a video dedicated specifically to drafting with some demonstrations, so I don't bog this spinning vlog down too much with all kinds of technical stuff that's not super necessary to get started spinning. All you really need to know about drafting to start spinning is that the thinner you pull the fiber apart, the thinner the singles will be, and thinner singles need more twist than thick singles to hold together. Also, the speed at which you treadle on the wheel determines how much twist is added to the yarn. So you might need to treadle faster for a thin yarn, but not so fast for a thick yarn. For this yarn, I am allowing the twist into the drafting zone and controlling the amount of twist traveling into the drafting zone with my front hand by pinching the yarn. And then I draft the fiber by pulling my back hand away from the wheel. And once I draft and spin as far back as I can comfortably move my arm, I feed the yarn onto the bobbin. It's a bit of a balancing act, but once you get the rhythm down and get in the flow, it's very satisfying in my opinion. Even though that's not what my face says, that's just what I look like when I focus. Now I'm about to have a new problem. My drive band jumped off my wheel. I don't think this has ever happened to me before in all my time spinning. It was pretty easy to pop the drive band back on and adjust the tension on the mother of all. But unfortunately, this became a reoccurring problem for this spinning session. But despite all of my troubles, I managed to finish these singles in one evening, somehow. The next day, I plied the 2 bobbins of singles together for a 2-ply yarn. The setup for plying is the same as making singles by threading the leader yarn and adding twist, except to ply, I'm spinning the wheel counterclockwise. Then you just thread the ends of the singles through the leader and let the twist travel into the singles. I didn't fix my wheel before plying, so it was still giving me a hard time by not keeping its momentum. Like, I am not trying to stop the wheel right here. It just stops on its own, which is not ideal. Then, once I finally got some momentum, even though I'm struggling to keep it, the drive band, guess what, popped off again. I'm just as baffled as you are that this would happen again by me not fixing the issue yet. So I investigated the balance issue and tried to tighten and adjust some things to hopefully fix the problem. Then I tried it out to see if I fixed the problem, and well, I'd say I didn't. So I adjusted some more by making sure the treadle and footman were tied very securely. That definitely seemed to help some because the drive band stopped jumping off the wheel, but you can see the wheel is still wobbling and off balance. The front leg of my wheel was also coming off the ground as I treadled, so I ended up using my non-treadling leg to keep the wheel grounded by putting it over the treadle bar and against the front leg. Then it was relatively smooth sailing from there. You can see here, as I ply, I use my back hand to keep the singles separate, untangled, and tensioned by making a claw shape with my hand and my pointer finger between the singles, while my front hand controls the twist and guides the yarn onto the bobbin. Here's a different perspective where you see the twist and hand motions a little bit better. It's hard to split the fiber completely even between the bobbins for a 2-ply yarn, so there's usually more yardage on one bobbin, which is where the plying bracelet comes into play. I showed how to do this in a previous spinning vlog, but I forgot to get a clip while making this specific yarn, so I'm using those other clips. But this is a valuable technique that lets you use up that last bit of singles that are just on one bobbin. It was such a relief to finally finish plying this yarn so I could stop battling with my spinning wheel. I'm definitely going to have to troubleshoot my wheel before I spin again, because whew, that was way harder than it should have been. Now it's Niddy Noddy time. If you've seen any of my other spinning vlogs, then you probably know what this is by now, but this helpful tool measures the yardage and loops the yarn into a hank. Once all the yarn is on the Niddy Noddy, I cut a few inches off of each end to tie and secure the hank, and I do the same with each end of the yarn, using a figure 8 method by splitting the yarn, then threading the tie through, and around the outside, then back through the gap, and around the other side, and then tie that in a knot. Then I cut off the excess from the ties. Now it's time to release the hank and do a little celebratory happy dance. Here's a closer look at it. I really love how vibrant the green is and how the colors interact. Now it's time to set the twist by giving the yarn a nice bath. I start with a bowl of hot but touchable water and then swirl in my soap. I've been using Tufts soap in the scent Chai Spice, and it smells so good. I then press the yarn in to get it fully saturated and swish it around a bit. but I don't get too aggressive with the movement because too much friction plus hot soapy water is a recipe for felting, and that is not what we're here to do. Then I let the yarn soak for a little bit. Sometimes I rinse the yarn in cold water, but sometimes I skip the rinse and just move on to drying by pressing out as much water as I can, but not twisting or wringing the yarn like a wet rag. Then I lay it out on a towel, roll it up, and press along the towel. Then I give the yarn a few big tugs. Sometimes I do this before towel drying, which sends water flying everywhere, but I don't think it really matters if you do it before or after towel drying. Lastly, I hang the yarn up on a chair to dry and put a towel under it to catch the drips. I spun this yarn up to possibly use in a project with these other yarns that I spun up. I made spinning vlogs for them too, so if you want to see how I made them, I'll have links in the description. But after I was spinning the yarn in this video, I'm not sure how I feel about all these collars together. I still have time to decide, so in the meantime, I'm going to move on to the next possible yarn for this project. I'll be back soon with that spinning vlog, and I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching. Bye!